Former President Donald Trump is on the campaign trail in Iowa today. His visit comes on the heels of a trip through Iowa by his top GOP rival, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis.
Yeah, and he's really picking up the miles. DeSantis made 5 stops across the state in 24 hours. And more Republican candidates are also heading to the Hawkeye State over the next few days.
CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe joins us now from Des Moines. Hey there, Ed. So DeSantis was largely ignoring attacks from the Trump campaign for months. You and I have discussed that. Now he's punching back. Talk to us about this campaign strategy and whether it's bearing fruit.
Well, now that he's actually running a campaign, his belief is that he can start drawing sharper contrast with the former president. Good to see you both. He did 5 stops here in Iowa yesterday. He's doing 4 stops in New Hampshire today, while former President Trump is here, meeting in a little bit with some ministers from across Iowa. They are a key group of influencers as they can rally socially conservative voters in this state. But Donald, I spotted one guy going in who introduced Governor DeSantis at his first event Tuesday night, which shows you that, both campaigns, all Republican presidential campaigns, understand that it takes time to talk to these kinds of people in order to get it done. And what DeSantis has been telling people as he travels this state, as he's now traveling New Hampshire, is former president had his chance, demonstrated in the last presidential election that he's lost support among those he would need in a general election, and that the Republican Party should think about trying something new. And when the former president swings at him, it looks now as if the Florida governor is more than willing to swing back, or at least remind voters of some of the things about Trump's recent political past that they should account for when they're making their choice.
And Ed, you're doing a great job following DeSantis as he covers so much ground. And just a little bit of reporter appreciation. You were standing out in the rain this morning. You've dried out now. That's great to see. But DeSantis has been trailing Trump by double digits in polling, but he seems to have some kind of confidence that attacking Trump won't affect his ability to win. Break down for us why you think that is.
There's a belief among a lot of these non-Trump campaigns that the former president may have hit his ceiling, somewhere between 35–40% of the Republican vote. So that, if we all do the math together, leaves 60%. And so that's what they're focused on getting, is as much of that 60% as possible to surpass him here in Iowa, a state that he didn't win in 2016 in a competitive caucus, and build momentum going into New Hampshire, South Carolina, and the other early states, the Super Tuesday states. The one thing, and we talked about this week, but it bears repeating, and it's part of why he's drawn so much attention, he has this large super PAC that is now raising considerable sums of money and starting to spend that money to go knock on doors here in Iowa, to remind people that the governor's in the race, share information about him, and they plan to go back and back and back. And that's something that Nikki Haley, that Tim Scott, that Ethan Hutchinson, that Chris Christie and Mike Pence, as they get ready to launch next week, aren't necessarily going to have doing that work already, with plans to do it in the first 18 primary states across the country. We haven't seen somebody set up an organization quite like that before, which is why the DeSantis team is convinced if he can go out there, get his name ID up, introduce what he's done as a governor, and then have that independent super PAC also helping, that he can close those numbers. And look, as you guys can appreciate, as our viewers can appreciate, not everybody's paying that much attention to this right now, right? They do here in Iowa, they will in New Hampshire, and so they've just got to keep reaching those people as often as possible to bake into their thinking as they prepare for the caucus in about 220 some odd days.
Yeah, and I know Iowans take that responsibility really seriously. Ed, let's talk about Chris Christie and Mike Pence.
Sure do.
They're joining the race. They're 2 former Trump allies whose bridges, it's pretty fair to say, are fully burned. Tell us what their candidacies mean to the former president.
Well, it's 2 more of his foes entering the fray, and we'll see how the former president himself engages with them. It was notable last night in a radio interview here in Iowa. The former president said, his relationship right now with DeSantis can be described as, quote, a war. And the reason it's a war is, he says, you focus on who's in second place. You don't necessarily worry about who's in 8th or 9th place. Where Mike Pence or Chris Christie fall once they get in, right now they're polling in the single digits, if at all, with DeSantis at number 2. So Trump is more likely to focus on DeSantis for now. If those other guys start rising, he'll probably turn his fire on them.
All right, Ed O'Keefe, thanks so much.
Thanks, Ed.